Okay, time for a generic book haul thing, because yes, I can read and I like books, and it turns out I can detect text on paper and contemplate it and digest it with my little brain thingy, and I want to talk about the books that I just bought because I'm a human being and I want attention. Because I'm just a total attention whore, and that's just how human beings work on the internet. Okay, so it's Tuesday right now, and I'm so tired. I didn't go to cram school today, mostly because it's my day off. Everybody's not going to cram school, and I decided to meet a friend of mine. And after we had lunch, we decided to go to this bookstore, which is basically the biggest bookstore in Korea, which also sells DVDs and vinyls. The plural of vinyl is vinyl. Plural's the right word, I believe so. Maybe not. I don't give a fuck. I'm terrible at grammar. It's not even my first language. And they sell CDs and all that bullshit for people who have way too much fucking money. So, let's just talk about it. Now, if you don't know, amongst my main three hobbies, which includes music and movies, is reading. I love reading. I don't know why. I've been reading since I remember being alive. So, I mean, I've read most of the, so-called classics. I've read Jane Eyre, and I've read Lord of the Flies. So I've read like 18th century, 19th century classics alongside modern classics of the 20th century. And I usually don't talk about books here. I'm not sure why. Books are very closely related to movies, and at times related to music, so I'm not really sure why I never touched upon it. But this is a good time to talk about it by showing you the books that I will eventually read. I'll eventually get to it. At the moment, I'm reading Bob Dylan's autobiography, Chronicles, Volume 1. There's supposed to be a Volume 2. I was too lazy to look for it, but fuck it, why not? That did not make any sense. Why don't we just talk about the stuff that I bought? Because I had money that I didn't make. But you know what? As long as I'm under my parents, I'm gonna leech as much fucking money from them until I have to pay for everything myself, and suddenly everything becomes expensive, and suddenly everything seems beautiful and worthy because it's fucking expensive. And that's the pain of being alive and being young and being poor as fuck, because when they say money doesn't buy happiness, it usually comes from people who are totally content with their lives, and when you're young, nothing is okay. Let's talk about the non-book stuff that I bought first, and because it would probably be easier to talk about them, quite honestly, because I've never talked about books on this channel. Yes, if you love music, I'm sure you know about this album, and I'm sure you know about this band. It's fucking Radiohead. It's in Rainbows. It's probably at times it's my favorite, at times it's my second favorite. Like, obviously the other one I'm talking about is OK Computer. Sometimes Kid A just kind of comes out of nowhere and says, hey, I exist, I'm also great, but yeah, it's usually in Rainbows or OK Computer. I got the CD because the vinyl was way too expensive. It's not like I have a turntable. I have a cousin who has a turntable. I'm not going to go to him every time I want to play in Rainbows. I already have it on my iPod. But, why not have the CD so Tom York could have more money that I don't have? But whatever. It's a great album. Like, 15 Steps starts off with, like, this really jazzy percussion-y thing, and then Body Snatchers is, like, a very muted, totally distorted grunge, and then the Nude comes in, and it's kind of like the stereotypical Radiohead that we kind of know today. It's very ambient, but it builds slowly, and then you have, what do you have? You have Weird Fishes, which is just beautiful, and then All I Need, Reckoner, which is just mind-blowing, and House of Cards. Videotape it's pretty fucking depressing, but it ends on a note that's somewhat bittersweet. I love the album. Just saying. If you check my top 40 favorite albums of all time as of this point video, you would see that OK Computer is in that list. And honestly, if I have to be really, really honest, it changes once in a while too in rainbows, but that's just once in a while. And the Blu-ray that I bought is Sapyeonje, and if you don't know anything about this movie, I suggest that you do watch it, because it basically really should be on the Criterion Collection, but it isn't, because most of those people are fucking stupid. Shout out to the Criterion Collection. This is my favorite Korean movie of all time. I think this is way better than some of the more popular ones that most people talk about when it comes to Korean films. You know, when most non-Korean people talk, when most people from the western part of the world talk about it, that's probably what I'm trying to say here. It's about Korean music, it's about family, it's about the power dynamics between the son and the father, it's about dedication to your art, it's about a lot of things, and it's very heartbreaking, and it ends on this really subtle and somewhat mystifying note that I always found to be very satisfying. Like, I don't want everything to be answered to me, and this is, in fact, in my top 40 favorite movies of all time, and if you want to check this shit out, please do, and if you want to explore Korean cinema, I do believe that the director Im Kwon-taek, or Kwon-taek Im, that's probably how it would be spelled in English, Kwon-taek Im. Check his stuff out. He's basically, maybe Ozu. He's kind of like the Ozu of Korean cinema. Maybe not as good. I'm not really sure, but he's really good. He's really good. Please check his stuff out. And now we finally get to literature, books, paper with texts and stuff. Let's start with an easy one. So I'm a huge fan of visual novels. Visual novels has always kind of took a big part of my life, mostly because I kind of started out reading English stuff through comic books. I read a lot of Garfield and Calvin and Hobbes and some random stuff here and there. And then I started to get introduced to visual novels. Around 2016, I started reading Ghost World and The Adventures of Jimmy Corrigan, which is beyond depressing, but very slightly hopeful in a very modern way that's kind of twisted and not necessarily really happy. Love Box Office Poison. That's probably my favorite. It's so good. And this is one of the more famous ones. And I still haven't read it. I'm glad that I finally got it. It's the World War II interpretation through fucking mice. It's mouse. Because it's a wordplay, I guess. Yeah, well, gotta check it out. I love I don't love World War II. I'm interested in most things that concern World War II. I think Hitler is one of the most interesting figures in modern history. While I was here, I finished reading Man's Search for Meaning, which is basically this guy's story of surviving the camps there, and I just find this example of human atrocity just absolutely fascinating. That's why I'm mostly, when it comes to history, I'm mostly interested in wars, and I want to see how somebody could like interpret that in such a different way through storytelling, through kind of using the Aesop's fables idea of storytelling, because it was such a human, incident in history that it might be very surreal reading it through the perspectives, or at least the imagery of animals. And then we have Kurt Vonnegut. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not absolutely knowledgeable about Kurt Vonnegut. I have read Slaughterhouse-Five, and I've read another one. Breakfast for Champions, that's the other one I read. I like those two quite a lot. I did read Slaughterhouse-Five twice, because I read it once when I was really young and I didn't get it at all, and then I read it again in high school, and then I was like, oh, okay, I get what's going on. I kind of see what he's trying to say, at least I think so, and I'm going to try it again. I've heard that Cat's Cradle is like one of his best. Of course, depending on the list, sometimes it's like one of his worst, so who knows. Let's see what the fuck happens with that shit. Usually when, like, generic, like, really boring, vapid YouTubers do book hauls, they usually have already read the books, but here, I'm just talking about shit, because that's what these vlogs are supposed to be. Eventually, this channel is just gonna depend on the cult of my personality, which is obviously most channels or things that were driven by cults of personality die off because people get sick of that personality, and or maybe it becomes exploited and becomes kind of evil, and nobody gives a shit about that stuff. So if I keep on doing these kinds of bullshit, nobody's gonna watch this stuff. But you know what? I don't care. I don't want to be a fucking YouTuber. That's boring. Unless you're Anthony Fantano, in which, you know, obviously that's, you guys shouted out at a Brockhampton gig, that kind of sounds exciting. So, recently I've been trying to challenge myself. You know, I usually read fiction and novels and visual novels, but now I'm trying to read non-fiction books. You know, maybe it's an autobiography, maybe it's something like, you know, The Man's Search for Meaning, something that's more about philosophy and psychology and society and politics. And I have bought Nietzsche's The Will to Power. I have no idea if I'll be able to comprehend all of it. It's not like it's the first philosophy book that I've ever read, that I'm gonna read, but we'll see. It turns out I thought there was no one on this floor right now, but it turns out there is, so I'm gonna try to make this quick. But yeah, Nietzsche. I have Zizek, that's Slovej. Why can't I remember his name right now? Zizek, Zizek, right? Z-I-Z-E-K. I have read some of his stuff, but I can't remember what it was. Another non-fiction book here. It's A Brief History in Time, because I've always been fascinated by Stephen Hawking. He's kind of like one of those rare incidents where a person is such an individual, even in his own field, that even though it's something that most people in the mainstream or most people just won't be interested in, because he makes it so interesting, and because his personality shines through, even though he's unable to move or talk, it somehow becomes this. He somehow becomes this mainstream figure, and I do want to at least try out and understand the universe through his eyes. Obviously, I have never read The Sound and the Fury. It's just one of those classic books that I've never read, and I'm not sure why. And I'm gonna do it now because I always hear about he's just one of those authors that you hear about if you do care about books, like, if you know, Faulkner, Salinger, Fitzgerald, Mark Twain, like all these people. There's always those certain figures that always come up, and you know, Faulkner's always one of them. And I've never read a single book by him. And usually when people talk about Faulkner, they usually talk about The Sound and Fury. So why not? I'm going to try it out. And the last book, I bought the book based on the title. Well, really, this is what happened. I saw the book, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to buy it because the title kind of sounded iffy. So the book's called The Trouble with Women. And, you know, like, when you read that title, especially in this day and age of the internet, you know, you immediately think that maybe it's this really stupid book about how women are inferior, and, you know, maybe it's just this forced answer towards third-wave feminism, and you think, like, okay, this might be some bullshit. And then you open this stuff up, and it's actually absolutely hilarious. It's basically, so it's got a lot of illustrations. It's mostly just stuff that is commenting on women and how women were throughout history. I'm just gonna read a part for you. Like, domestic servants, slaves, and women who worked in coal mines had men's hands, which served as a warning to women who wanted to leave the domestic sphere. That's funny to me. That's hilarious. That's not only somewhat, it's not directly mocking feminism, obviously. It's just kind of it's kind of having this twisted perspective on it, and it's also just trying to put it in a comedic space, and it just gives you this totally twisted perspective that doesn't necessarily make you disapprove of women or feminism. It's just like it's the sense of humor. It's like Larry David making a Holocaust joke. You know, it's an interesting way to look at the world. You know, you sometimes just have to take certain things not too seriously, make some jokes at it, and it's not like you're against it. You're just trying to have a different perspective, and not necessarily just totally devote to that, but just announcing it. And those are the books that I read. Now, obviously, it's a huge, huge bookstore, so, you know, there were books like these, and there were books like these. I'm pretty sure that was the first time I ever hinted vaguely at anything negative about Donald Trump. So that's a part of the history of this channel. That's a landmark right there. The first vague Donald Trump diss that I've ever done. This vlog's over. I am tired. I am also very hungry and thirsty. And bye.